Welcome to Leadership Kung Fu with your hosts, Sandi and Jennifer Long.
Welcome to our next episode of Leadership Kung Fu, where we're going to be talking a little bit today about alignment of strategy to action and making sure that we have those living systems in place to make strategy visible across an organization. So really, what's the cohesive action that needs to take place? So I'm Sandi and I am here in Toronto, Canada with Satori Consulting. And I'm here with my friend and podcast host, Jen Long from Denver, Colorado at Own Up.
Hello, Sandi.
How are you?
I am good. I'm excited to talk about the stuff we have today because it's such an issue.
It is such an issue. And we were talking just before this, just having a conversation this morning with a client, and it's just so evident. And when we talk about it, it seems so clear. Mm-hmm. And yet in the workplace, it just becomes convoluted.
Right. So today it's really the focus on, you can't execute on strategy if you don't have aligned action, and really kind of exploring what aligned action, cohesive action really means and what gets in the way of it and what you might do to get it right. So that's the plan.
That's the plan. Yeah.
See if we can execute on that. That's the strategy.
That's the strategy for today, for sure. Excellent. So maybe we can start by talking about what gets in the way. Let's start with the negative first, because there's lots of things we can do. But, in both your work and my work, we find that there is a huge disconnect between alignment and the strategy and what people need to do to get there and to gain that alignment. So what are you finding in talking with your clients these days?
Well, so I think one of the things that once they've sort of named the problem and are busy trying to figure out, okay, how do we attack the problem across the organization and how do we make decisions about that, is they have the conversation as a leadership team on Friday, and then they go back to work on Monday and they engage in the work the same way they've always engaged in the work. And so they're going to think to themselves, I've got ownership of the strategy. And so I'm in the marketing department and I'm going to go and do the marketing department relative to how I understand the strategy. And so that's what we'd call fragmented ownership, that just because I own the strategy
for marketing
doesn't mean that I am doing coherent actions that support and guide other actions across the divisions of the organization.
Yes.
We're not working in concert. We're working in silos.
Right. And silos are a big thing. And communication is a big thing. And communication is really the only way that's going to break down silos. And I'm sort of thinking about that Friday meeting and sort of playing it out in my head of what it might look like. And it's probably something like marketing gives a little update of what they're doing. HR gives a little update of what they're doing. And finance gives a little update of what they're doing. What they're not likely doing is tying what they're doing to the overall strategy. So it's the busy work that they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And not talking about what do we need to do holistically to move the ball forward. And so it's like, what do I need to do in my area? What do my people need to do? And I think if you start broadening it and having those conversations that really start digging into, as a collective, what are we doing? Are we moving forward collectively? It shifts, right? Because your Monday morning get back to business might be different if you're talking about alignment versus just doing what you've always done.
Right. So you've lost alignment when everybody's busy, but nobody's working on the same thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's probably the case all the time, right? And so taking that time, and time is a precious commodity. We've talked about that a lot of times, but time's a real precious commodity. And so making sure that you're strategizing, and use the word strategy
it's
again.
Decisions, right? So how are we talking? We don't get together. We shouldn't be getting together and talking about what we're doing. We should be getting together and talking about the decisions we're making.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. And how we're making those decisions is really the the meat of, are we all making the decisions that make sense together versus I'm making the right decisions just for my division based on what
Right.
I've been doing previously, or how I'm interpreting this on my own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if you're not having those conversations, I don't know how you all row in the same direction, right? Because inherently, if I'm doing what I think is right for my area, because now you got to remember I'm being compensated on my outcomes.
Yeah.
And if I'm only looking at it in isolation, that there's at the end of the year, when you start looking at, did we get where we wanted to? There's usually a misalignment because we're not having those conversations early and consistently.
Well, right. Which, when you say misalignment and compensation, right? The incentives,
Mm,
where are your incentives knocking you out of alignment?
yeah.
Right. So that's a whole piece of the puzzle too, in terms of, if your function is running on its own metrics, what, because your metrics are your metrics, and how are your metrics, right,
Yeah.
working in concert with everyone else's? And so I think part of that is, how do you get collaborative metrics? How do you get metrics that apply in concert together and not specific to just one area of the business? Because 9 times out of 10, if you're managing the performance of your people and the decisions of your department, you're looking at your department's metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just putting everybody's individual metrics together. Where are the metrics that support the whole thing?
Yeah. And you can have both. Like, I think we should
Mm-hmm.
be clear, right? It doesn't have to be a joint set of metrics, but there should be an overarching set that transcend the organization. And then you can have your individual, because what happens in marketing is going to be different from HR. Like, that's just a reality.
Right, right. But you've got to have the strategic measure. Otherwise, you don't know, are we moving? Are we actually solving this problem or not?
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
Right. So kind of readjusting your legacy scorecards or your budget structures.
Mm.
And if those are reinforcing silos, how do you reevaluate those or change them such that, right, your budget structures are more in concert, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we talked about,
Mm.
part of the issue is the reallocation of resources. And
Right.
this is probably the number one sticking point of people not getting in concert together.
No, because my budget's my budget. I'm not giving it up.
I'm really turfy.
Yeah.
And strategy redefines the turf,
Mm-hmm.
redesigns the map. And so you've got to move your players on the board to support the goals, right? It's like, where is it? Where do we got to get? And how does that mean I move the players around such that we can move it forward? And that willingness to shut down some initiatives in your area and take those people and reskill them somewhere else. And those sorts of actions are part of what's really important. And where are you working in combination across to do something together?
Yeah. And it that sort of ties back to, if you really are aligned on what the problem is, it's going to be easier to do some of that horse trading, because you're going to be able to see what it is that you're giving up for the greater good.
Right.
When you can't see that, then there's protectionism and not willing to give up, because you give up money once. We'd all been through budgets, right? You give up some money, you never get it back, right?
Yeah. And if you're bonusing me on things that are very specific to my silo, of course I'm going to protect that budget.
Absolutely.
Of course I am.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's that bigger picture look. And I think it's really looking at, if everybody is really thinking about strategy every day and thinking about it from a we perspective as opposed to an I perspective, it'll really make the strategy come to life every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it really takes that senior team out of doing mode, or, lagging indicator mode of what have we done, to what should we be doing, and what could we be doing, and what should we be doing differently, which says that you really need to, what are our workflows that need to change? Like, how are we communicating with each other? What needs to change? All of these sort of coordinated actions will help strengthen the execution overall.
100%. And so are you rewarding collaboration, like cross unit problem solving?
Mm.
Those are like really tangible metrics of how much are we working across the organization versus just solving the problems that relate to us. And what is a shared accountability dashboard look like?
Right.
You guys are, teams love a dashboard.
Who doesn't?
What are we looking at?
Who doesn't love a dashboard?
So I was going to try and find an example, right? So what this might look like. And so I was thinking about some of the companies I've worked for. So I do a lot of work with manufacturers and whatnot. And so engineering and production is if we're gonna do better handoffs because we do too much rework, we do too much, we're sending things back and forth. It's just our product gets too expensive because the labor gets too intense. And if the strategy then starts to become right, if the diagnosis, the problem is that production delays and cost overruns are caused by these fragmented handoffs between the two groups, right? Then how do we standardize the handoff process and close the loop between design and execution, right? So the guiding policy becomes thinking about how do we do that, and then aligned actions, like what would that look like? For example, right? Or actions would be: do we do cross-functional daily huddles between engineering and production? Right. So that's an aligned action that those two divisions get together and figure out in their production teams, right? Do we put the teams closer together? Do we create proximity in the organization in a way we haven't, right? We got people who are 2 buildings away from what's actually happening.
Right.
Right. And email and text is not coordinated action, right? If we can get eyeball to eyeball on a daily basis and know the people we're working with. So that becomes part of the key performance indicators, right?
Right.
And so a fancy name for this kind of action is what would be first pass yield. How do we get first pass things go right? We are doing all the things for each other that we need to do, and there's no gray area, and there's no misunderstanding or rework that we can gauge, right? And then how are we retraining our engineers and our planners and our production people in problem solving together, so that they understand what that looks like together? Because a lot of times, because we're in silos, we disagree, our metrics are different, and then all we do is escalate up to senior leaders.
Right. And so, Jen, you work in manufacturing. This is your bellywick. How often do you see this happen in motion?
Rarely.
Okay. Right.
Rarely, because leaders will get distracted. They'll get distracted by the client they own, the thing they have. And so they'll have this moment of strategy and they'll put all this out there, and then they wander off and something else becomes important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And so I'm thinking, as you're talking, it is what you're suggesting is it's alignment, but it's the rhythm in which they need to work and that they're working together. Right.
That's the flow. That's the workflow.
Yeah. And it's really changing, getting in the same room and talking and having, again, alignment, not to kill that word today, but on what they're trying to achieve. But busyness gets in the way. Time gets in the way. Mm-hmm. Other objectives get in the way. Fires get in the way, right? The shiny squirrel, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And so how do we help organizations that aren't doing this, that are thinking, well, maybe that makes some sense, start to do it, right? It sounds really simple to me, like just start doing it, right?
They have to really stand outside and ask themselves hard questions. What do if this is the aligned action, what do our employees really need to look like? What do operations need to look like to support this action?
Yeah.
And how is that different from what we're doing now?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because one of the things that we talk a lot about is this notion of, nobody wants somebody to come in and say, we've always done it that way. Right.
Right.
right? It's like everybody talks about that. We should really be looking outside the box. Color outside the lines, all those sort of things. And yet, as organizations, we don't take the time to actually do that. And
Right.
so, time well spent, I would suggest, in really looking outside in at what could be done differently for a different outcome.
Well, right. And it goes to, we don't question policy, right? We don't question standard. We had a standard, and this was a standard that worked whenever we needed the standard. Now it's not working.
Mm.
And that if there are policies, so, I part of manufacturing is they've got all kinds of compliance standards and this
Sure.
and that and the other, right? And to really question all those standards and look at those hard and bring the people in the part of the organization that have that expertise and understand that and can say, we can renegotiate that standard.
Mm-hmm.
We can renegotiate that policy. Don't act like it's, but I think people feel like they're constrained at times in ways that they don't question because it says policy, because it says compliance, because it says all these things. And what you have to realize is that things change over time.
Sure.
And
they
as
do.
things move forward, just because it's been this compliance standard for the last 50 years, why are we not asking the question? And can we negotiate that? And what power do we have to impact some of the guardrails that are restricting us in ways that don't help?
Mm-hmm.
Because chances are your clients, the people you serve, right? They want where you're trying to go. And they want it faster and cheaper and better.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it sort of leads me to think about the people that you have at this table. So, to give an example of something that happened this week, actually, where an organization had their mandate was defined for them 35 years ago. Very restrictive, sort of ministry, government based.
Mm-hmm.
They have an opportunity now to redesign it. So 35 years of working in the same way. And real heated debate about we cannot change because, it wasn't, we've always done it this way, but essentially we're hogtied or whatever it is by this mandate. Couldn't see that the mandate is now, it can change. And so do we have the right people at the table when you're having these discussions to say, what are the possibilities? Because I think that's the other thing is we need to make sure that the right people are at the table to have these conversations, people that are innovative, people that think forward, people
right?
that
Right leader, right time. Have we got somebody who can see something you can't see?
Yeah.
Because leading really is about seeing. Like I can see a way forward. You guys we just gotta have a conversation. And if you're not willing, right? And leading is about change, and leading is about we talked about that before. That if you're unwilling to drive the level of change your organization needs, if you're unwilling, step aside.
Yeah. Or, and so, so that's another thing. I think people get in the way of allowing these things to happen and happen well. They get in the way of our rhythm of getting things done.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, so this also goes to alignment challenge, right? So like blinders on or truths that are no longer truth, that you just can't get your paradigm shift going, right? But also the leadership drift of chasing new priorities. Like I feel like leaders do not let strategy, they don't give it enough oxygen to get momentum to see if it's going to work.
I would agree.
And so having a real conversation around timing and expectations around timing. And if you're actually doing strategic work and you're talking about it and you've got collective metrics, you should be able to see things in a different way. And if you've got the aligned actions and you've got the aligned metrics, you're looking at the right thing as opposed to looking at everybody's individual metrics and wondering why nothing's changed. And then going, well, the strategy's not working.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And the impatience for something, right? How much time is the right amount of time before you can get an itchy trigger finger about doing the next thing?
Yeah.
And
And so,
that leaders, I think, are the number one. They'll shoot their own strategy down before they give it a chance to breathe.
yeah. And I wonder if it's just because a lot of the times we are operational. We talk a lot about strategy,
Mm-hmm.
but we are operational at the core. And
Yeah.
so it's easy to slip into operations, full tilt than
Yeah.
to actually stay up here where maybe it feels like we're not moving the needle. And so,
Yeah, I think that's always a big thing when you move from like mid-level to like senior level is it's hands off and it doesn't feel the same. You don't
no,
feel like things are happening because you don't have a checklist and you don't have the tactical responsibility that you did. And so the work doesn't feel the same. And so all of a sudden, I was in a conversation with a client the other day who were talking about doing assessments and not doing a cognitive evaluation. And I was like, hang on a second. The job of leaders is thinking, and that is the job. And
yeah,
how are we thinking about what we're doing, and how are we seeing, and it's mapping and it's charting, and it's not the doing, and it doesn't feel the same. And so that's why the impatience, I think, sets in, because that whole dopamine hit we get on solving a problem and getting a thing done
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
doesn't come as often.
Yeah. So I think, people stepping into other new leadership roles or just leaders in general, perhaps really need to do what do we need to stop doing analysis? Like if it's not serving us, one
Hmm.
of the bravest things that somebody can say is like, we're done with that.
Yeah.
We're done with that.
Yeah.
But you got to be brave and courageous in order to say that and sort of lead in this new way of thinking.
Letting go.
Uh-huh.
Yes. All right. So, pruning distractions. Pruning distractions. How do you stop getting in the tactical weeds and start looking at another problem before you let your strategy right? So, don't get bored and confused, and let your alignment die on the vine because you can't stay focused.
Right, right. Well, I think going back to the meetings that we talked about earlier, if you're talking tactics all the time and what you just did versus what you're going to do and how it aligns, like the language needs to change within organizations in order to keep it alive. And it's
Mhm.
not just the leader at the top that needs to sort of push it down. It has to be owned by everyone.
Mhm.
And that it goes back to that communication piece, right? Are we having good, solid meetings where we are communicating about that joint strategy and how we're furthering it versus what we've just finished doing and checking that off our list? It's
Right. The
very much a
communication,
mindset shift.
communication, clarity, clarity, clarity. Can people repeat back to you what is the strategic objective? What is the
Yeah.
strategy? Can I understand that and say that to you? All the way down, up and down my organization in the same kind of sentence, right? So
Mhm.
there's no variation, there's no drift and shift. And how are you guys talking about it? Which, goes back to that whole capacity to do strategic work. Are we talking about how overwhelmed we are, or are we talking about what we're doing today to meet the strategic objective,
Right. Right. Probably
right?
the first. And I think, we've talked about this whole notion of duplicate efforts and conflicting priorities. And I think really at the end of the day, um, it might feel to some that nobody owns the strategy or nobody owns the whole of it because we're all sort of in it together. And so how do you build and sort of knit it together so that everybody feels like they're part of it and not just nobody really owns it? I
Yeah.
think
Well,
that's a
and
difficult
that's
thing.
well because we get together and we talk about the day-to-day results. We get together and we talk about where are you on this, where are you on that. We don't get together and talk about strategy on a regular basis, right? When we are and what does that mean at every layer, right? Top team strategy, what are they doing and how are they looking at where do we need to pivot, whatever that is.
Mhm.
But how are all your directors and managers and first line managers creating opportunity for strategic conversation, so they're talking about strategy
Yep.
and they are relating the day to day, the plan of the day, how is this impact, right? And then at the end of at the end of the month, right, let's look at the where are we talking about our KPIs that are in concert?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're talking about your individual KPIs, you could do that with your direct manager, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
sort of the time and place for that. In
Mm-hmm.
these other meetings, these cross-functional meetings, it really should be about the organization drivers
Mm-hmm.
and what they are and how we are actually moving. And if you start sort of doing that, the
Mm-hmm.
natural flow, the natural cadence is to say, we need to put more resources here and take them from here in order to make it happen. And again, that will ebb and flow depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve at any given time.
Right.
Um,
Well, and so part of the strategic conversation you're having at the lower level is when you're reallocating resources, people feel like they're losing jobs.
yeah.
They feel like they're losing work. They're like, what does this mean for me? What do you mean I'm no longer doing this? Because when you stop doing some projects and you reallocate or you, right, those people are the ones who are going to execute. And so your conversation and clarity around what this means for them and how that's going to go is part of the strategic work.
And buy-in is so really important. I'm not talking about buy-in at the lower level. I'm talking about the same language is being used across the leadership team to talk about it, right? It's sort of like the board level when, I might vehemently oppose something, but if the board says it's going to happen, I need to, buck up and move on, right?
Right.
And that has to happen.
It has to happen. And it just, I'm laughing because this is another alignment killer, buy-in, because people confuse buy-in for agreement.
Right.
And we aren't looking for agreement. We are looking for commitment.
Yes.
Are you willing? Here's what's happening, right? And that's the clarity part is, let's be clear. I'm not looking for you to agree. You might love your job. You might love what you're doing. You might love this project. It doesn't get us where we need to go. It doesn't solve the problem we need to solve. So because you have this set of skills, we're going to put you in this play, in this project, in this thing. And I don't need you to agree with me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that sounds really harsh, but it's I'm going to explain the why, and I'm going to communicate with you what the big objective is and what your part is in the big objective.
Mhm.
But that's and I think those are the struggles where we feel like we need to hug all the people and bring them in and do the thing.
Yeah.
But people want to know the expectations. People want to be clear about what the roles are. People want to know how that's going to help them career wise. Be prepared
Mhm.
with all that, right? We're going to say,
Yeah.
because your ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and your agility and adaptability and flexibility is really what I'm looking for in my future leaders.
Absolutely.
That's why you're going to move.
Right. We've just placed this, I mean, we just placed the CEO and looking at his sort of trajectory to get there, he had taken all of these really odd assignments. Like there was nothing linear about this.
Yeah.
But talk about getting somebody who's well-rounded in many different areas now. Like at the moment, he just thought, okay, like they don't want to put me here. But and I don't think he was thinking necessarily that it's a stepping stone. But
Mm-hmm.
wow, one, he was willing to step out on a limb and go into areas that he knew nothing about. And they
Yeah.
had he had the skills and the talent to sort of, do well
Yeah.
in them. But wow, if we did more of that in organizations to say, hey, Jen, you do have the skills. I want to put you over here. I know it's HR and not marketing, but
Yeah.
let's put you in there for a year.
Yeah.
How powerful is that?
Well, and how do you get people to understand that their ambitions, and the more well-rounded they are in business and the more they're exposed to the company, the more valuable they are, because they can see it from every perspective as you do this kind of tour of duty. But some people, I just want to do this. I want to stay in a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it also, when you can create that kind of agility and create leaders in that kind of way, it's going to push up against some of your HR policies. It's going to push up against some of the thinking of, you need at least 5 years in this seat to get
Yeah,
promoted in the organization. And so where is strategy pushing against legacy structures and systems? And
absolutely.
so when we talk about aligned action and how you throw yourself out of alignment, if you can only promote and interview people who have that kind of, like, we've got all these rules about how many years you must have done this in
Mhm.
this organization, when really it's more helpful if people have a variety of things in execution.
Sure.
How are those things aligning, right? Which is the work of strategy can get pretty deep, especially if you're like, look, we gotta really realign all of these things
Thinking
because
differently. Hard
you're not
thing.
sure what's touching what, and people don't want to do stuff and resist you because why would I go do this when if I'm gonna get higher here, I've got to meet these tick boxes, which work directly in opposition of what you're trying to achieve in execution.
Yeah. Yeah. And so sort of going back to how we started here was like, what gets in the way? A lot gets in the way of
Hmm.
actually making this happen. So in theory, it's a fairly simple thing, but people get in the way, our legacy systems get in the way, our legacy thought processes get in the way. Um, our leaders get in the way. We've always done it this way gets in the way. There's just so much.
Yeah, my day to day, I want to get this done gets in the way because
Yeah,
I don't break my own patterns. I don't question my own decision making on how I spend the day. Well, until somebody else does this different, I'm just going to do this because I can't see it happening.
yeah, yes. And I think, that's a really good point because not everybody sees big picture. And
Hmm.
that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
So you need to, I think as a collective and from a leadership perspective, we realize that everybody around the table is not seeing everything in sort of wide angled lens view. And so we have to help people at that level see it, bring them along. And then as we're going down the organization, again, not everybody, there's a whole lot of functional, attitudes that come into play.
Yeah.
And which is also the problem because we tend to promote because of functional competence.
Hmm.
But is that really the best person for the job to be able to, the real well-rounded person probably has a bit of a more wide-angled view lens to things.
Yeah.
So are
So
we doing people a service to say that
yeah,
you must stay in that job for 5 years to
yeah.
be
When
promoted?
we ask that question, if this is the problem we're going to solve, what do our employees need to look like?
Yeah.
How does that create a whole cascade of aligned actions just in HR?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? How do we evaluate people for succession as opposed to right? Ready for the next level is like one of the metrics. Ready for the next level of what? Right? High
Yeah.
potential for what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And really looking at that differently because it's your systems have to shift for your strategy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Your
Absolutely.
systems, and that's that married to the system. This is the system. We've got it set up. We've been Six Sigmaing that system. We are really married to the efforts we put in, only to come in and knock it over because the strategy says this, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that's the dynamic. That's the dynamic. That is what forward-thinking companies are willing to question what they're doing to make sure, right? And I think that this goes against sort of the if you're publicly traded, the pressure of the street to just be consistent and delivering your percentage and you're
Yeah.
you're right. So there's risk. There's always risk, but chances of being successful in strategy are dependent on aligned action.
Yes.
Are dependent. You cannot execute good strategy unless you've got aligned actions across the organization. Full stop.
Yeah.
So all of those worries start with that.
Yeah. So aligned action, shared understanding of the problem, right?
Hmm. Shared
That's
understanding, mutual
cross
understanding, same
mutual
language.
understanding, same
Yeah.
language. Everybody is, has drunk the Kool-Aid and they're going to go forward on it.
Hmm.
Transparent priorities, right? Having discussions cross-functionally about what your priorities are and willing to pause or pivot when needed and shift when needed, right? And so getting rid of that notion of this is my area
Hmm.
versus our collective areas are going to get us where we need to go as an organization, which is really what we need to have
Hmm.
happen. And then consistent feedback loops. So communication, 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 which is where
Yeah.
things usually fall down. But
Yeah. Which is
those
gonna.
four things are
Hmm.
going to help with that alignment of action.
Right. Right. So maybe a question or two to ponder is
Mm.
right. So where is your organization aligned in words but not action? What political or incentive systems pull your people away from that course, from
Mm.
alignment, right? When was the last time you pruned an initiative in service of coherence?
Pruned. Interesting word.
Said no to,
Yes.
stop doing,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
right? And then how does your leadership cadence keep the strategy alive or quietly kill it?
Mm. And I'm going to add one more, which is what's one thing your organization can do this week that will help you row together more effectively?
There you go. There you go. Up for discussion. This is such a broad topic. So hopefully some of this
Mm.
has been helpful for people who are listening to think about how important the aligned action part is, right? Because they get so focused on the goals and the tactics. They don't really consider how those all fit together.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All
Yeah.
right.
All right.
Well,
Share it with
yeah.
super fun.
Super fun. Yeah, no, share it with your people for sure. And send us any questions and comments. We like comments. Anything else that you'd like to hear from Jen and I in terms of the Leadership Kung Fu podcast? We're happy to rant about anything, really.
Yeah, all the things we were sort of having conversations with all the time. Love it.
Mhm.
Love it. So good to see you. Looking forward to the next one. Whatever that's going to be, we're going to figure that out. We'll let you know.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandy's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And you can check out Jen's website at accountabilityatwork.com. If you like what you hear, let us know by leaving a review on your favorite listening platform. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.